Approaching his 90th birthday in September, he was asked about mortality, about the great beyond, about what's next. He responded with this: "People come to me and say, 'Sonny, what's heaven like?' I tell them, 'Look, man, don't ask me things like that. Live your life right now and try to understand it's bigger than what's in front of you.'" The Sonny in that story, or that quote, is Sonny Rollins, one of the greatest living improvisers in the world. And I want to hear how Sonny Rollins improvises his way through this time. And that was what the interview in the New Yorker recently published was all about. He's been called the saxophone colossus. 60 albums, 70 years of performance, living through the heyday or the great history of 20th century jazz, also dealing with all the issues around race, facing addiction, exploring spirituality. Truly one of the wise voices in our time. So good to hear him speak his truths. And he says he goes on to say in that interview, when asked about what's going to happen, he's speaking about music and jazz, but hear it as culture, as art. And he's wondering what's going to happen beyond this pandemic time. He says, "I can't prophesize, but I have a strong intuitive feeling that it will be stronger than ever, and we will have another shot at trying to turn this world around." And then these words, and these were the ones that really caught me, partly because of the project that I'm part of, the Kindness of Jazz, a project supported by Mackay Church and by the United Church Foundation. So my ears were tuned when I heard these words. He was asked about what's important when we're doing our thing, whatever our thing might be. And he says this very categorically: it's not about your music. It's about what makes your music your music. You've got to have a feeling like that. You have to have a reason for your music. Make it for something. Make it for kindness. Make it for peace. Whatever it is. You know what I mean? I hear those words, and I'm taken to the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. I'm taken to Jesus' voice, riffing, improvising, somebody recording these pieces of wisdom that aren't all logically connected, but sort of arc through a solo. It's music. It's jazz. In my imagination, as I think about the possibility of witnessing Sonny Rollins, this talent, improvising some of the deepest imaginative melodies and harmonies ever. Imagine being in a club where he is, and imagine being able to record or absorb some of that. I think about Matthew, or whoever wrote the Gospel of Matthew, taking these words from Jesus, words that were also improvised, words that emerged in conversations with beloved friends, beloved communities of friends, along lake shores, around campfires, over meals. These conversations emerged in these moments. And I hear the improvising voice of Jesus, sharing the words that Lori has already shared with us this morning, Do not judge so that you may not be judged. Ask and it will be given you. Give good things. And then in the 12th verse, in everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. There is a playfulness to our life of faith. There's a playfulness and an intensity. And in many respects, that's what has led to the particular project that I'm not going to talk a lot about the project today, but the energy behind that, the spiritual or gospel energy that grounds the kindness of jazz comes from a place where we affirm, we seek to affirm through music, but really through music to affirm in life a certain playfulness and intensity in how we find our way through this world. And it strikes me that this is such a valuable commodity in this moment. To bring playful intensity to this time is so needed, and I hear it in the riffing quality of Jesus in that 7th chapter of Matthew, bouncing from topic to topic, image to image, grounded in that golden rule. As I imagine not just why we enjoy music and art and all the forms of human expression, when I imagine why or what's behind that, I lift up to you today kindness. At the heart and at the height of our expressions and our expressiveness, we are called into kindness. I love the dimension in our faith tradition that grounds us in that demand. That demands that we're not doing spirituality for spirituality's sake or art for art's sake. We're not playing music or drawing pictures in order as an end unto themselves. As a faith community, we are fostering the golden rule, inviting us to find ways of living into that ability to see in the other and to respond to the other as I would want to be responded to. And in that moment, the law, the gospel, comes to life. Right there. That's it. It is at the heart of the improvised moment. It is at the heart and at the hard work at the heart of jazz. Because as much as, I love when I'm able to play a saxophone over a tune with some other musicians. What I'm doing at my best is listening. What I'm doing at our best, what we are doing at our best is listening to those around us. And then adding a few notes. Intensely listening. Playfully listening. It's a vital task. It affirms the other. And in affirming the other, it honors the self. And in that exchange, something divine is discerned. That's it. That's it, but we can do it all night. We can play those songs through all the gigs, in all the clubs, alongside all the lake shores, around all the campfires, valuing in those moments the ways in which we improvise our relationships, where we resonate with one another, and in resonating with the other, in listening and feeling the vibrations in the room, we find our voice. I find my voice. When I imagine what we are doing as a people of faith in these days, I am initially so aware of limits. And I'm so aware of limits because of the strangeness of the moment. But then very quickly I become aware of an openness, a gracious intensity, a willingness to absorb the depth of the moment, to speak to the depth of the moment. We struggle as faith communities with some very real challenges around how we meet, around the nature of this exchange, around all sorts of dimensions in this time. But if I really listen, I checked online this morning, 475,000 people have perished as a result of COVID-19. How do we live with that resonance? How do we let that resonate with our moments, our challenges, our lives? For some of us, it may be resonating in very real and personal ways. I spoke to a family this week who recently moved to Canada from Brazil and are struggling with great awareness of loss back home. When we hear that other, we are called into a deeper and deeper place. At one point in Sonny Rollins' career, he stopped playing in public. He was living in New York, Brooklyn, I guess, and he would go up every day from the summer of 1959 till almost the end of 1961, for often 12, 14 hours on the Williamsburg Bridge, and played in the midst of the traffic, in the midst of the chaos. A black man who had been through incarceration, experienced addiction, found his way into a new place, new level of artistry, celebrated around the world by that point, stepped away and allowed himself to resonate with the realities, whether they are social, economic, racial, disease, allowed that time to speak to his art, to speak to his spirit, and came back in 1961 to continue a legacy of truth-telling, of spiritual revelations. I hear Sonny doing that. I love that contemporary story. I'm so drawn to that image and that pilgrimage. I hear it in Jesus. I hear that back and forth between this place and this context and that neighbor and this conversation and that crowd, and then stepping away. And I think we're here we are. We're in a moment to allow that resonant place between us, between my neighbor and myself. Allow that place to breathe. Allow that place to be the place of divine wisdom, as it's always been and will always be, even with this pause in which we find ourselves. We are blessed to do this in so many ways. Jazz, the sort of expression that is part of the service today, is deeply embedded in that desire to be in conversation with the deepest sources of inspiration that spontaneously emerge in our midst. And I think it's a very helpful image for me as a musician, but far more importantly, as a human being, as a person seeking faith. That it's in those spontaneous expressions, it's in that resonance with neighbor, it's in with that deep appreciation of what's going on around me. It's actually stopping and being encouraged by one another, by you, by us, to encourage one another to listen to the truths being told in our world. And know that that's where God will be revealed, as God has always been revealed, right there. You're going to hear a little bit of the Tom Reynolds Trio in a few minutes. They play jazz every week at St. Andrew's United Church on Bloor Street, Bloor and Yonge in Toronto. Wonderful trio. It's got some images attached to that. They've been trying to find a way of sharing that embodiment of music and resonance and appreciation from week to week, and it's so nice that so great that they were able to share some of that gift with us this morning, to hopefully, as a way, I hope, of furthering this image, of deepening, of rooting this image in this service, and most importantly, in our spirituality, just to find ways of being those improvising, listening human beings that Matthew was celebrating in the way he wrote the 7th chapter of his gospel, that is being revealed in the sorts of individuals such as Sonny Rollins. And at the end of the day, to simply value the improvisation that's going to carry you through this time, that's going to carry you through life, that's going to sustain you. And I hope and pray, I am quite confident that when approached that way, we find that playful intensity that is at the core of the gospel, at the core of Jesus' passion for this life, this world, and this time. Amen.